Marcelo, how did you approach creating the musical score for May December to capture the essence of the film's stylized melodrama?
Well, that was a very unique experience because part of the task was to adapt previously existing music by Michel Legrand from a movie called The Go-Between. So that was my first few conversations with Todd Haynes were about like he really wanted to use that theme and that music as the basis. It ended up being about 60% of the score is the Legrand, and that but I would adapt it and kind of molded to the movie more. So it was a very unique. I never done this before, where I was working with pre-existing music. So it was very challenging in some ways, but also very satisfying. I mean, the director Todd Haynes is a completely unique and sort of groundbreaking director. So everything he does is very different from the last one. We had worked together in his last film, Dark Waters, which the score was a more traditional score, if you will. I wrote all the music, and but this one he wanted the score to almost be kind of on a separated from the movie in a certain way, instead of the usual thing where the music is drawing you into the movie. This almost works the other way around. It's very kind of in your face, and it jolts you out of the movie when it comes, and it's very melodramatic by design, and keeps you on edge all the time. And that was the task, and that was what Todd wanted us to achieve.
Could you elaborate on how Michel Legrand worked on the go-between influence your approach to scoring by December?
Can you say that again,
Sorry,
please?
could you elaborate on how Michel Legrand's work on the go-between influence your approach to scoring by December?
Yes. So as I said, we use the themes as for many different scenes, starting the beginning of the film, and the idea was to always keep getting back to that theme for one main sort of through line of the film. There's other kind of different types of music, some more ambient, more suspenseful things that were not related to Legrand. But the approach was to modernize it, make it more modern, make it more contemporary. So along with the orchestra, which that's what that score originally was written for, we added quite a bit of synthesizers and electronics. And also at times I changed the instrumentation, made it a little bit more modern, more contemporary. So it, even though the sound of that melody is quite classical, Todd wanted it to also have a slightly more modern sensibility.
In what ways did you adapt your musical style to complement the themes of identity and self-reflection explored into the film?
Well, when I was doing my own cues, the idea was some of them were meant to be closer to the Legrand. Some of them were meant to be completely a different thing. So it was really on a case by case basis. We kind of figured out the places where we wanted Legrand to go, and then there were all this holes, if you will, where I had to do my thing. But I kept instrumentation similar, a lot of piano, and very aggressive music, very busy and very. It never happens under dialogue, so we never had to worry about dialogue. It's always happening in between dialogue scenes. And so there was a lot of freedom, and there's also sort of an intensity to the music that I've never had to do in a score before, where the music was so in your face and so loud. And when it comes, it's like it's almost deafening. But he wanted it to jolt us out of the film in a sense.
Was there specific challenge you faced when scoring May December, considering its unique narrative and character dynamics?
I mean, one of the first was I had to transcribe all the music from a recording. We had no scores for the Legrand, so that was quite challenging, and very that it was very complex music, and it took a lot to do that, and then reorchestrated, and just becoming kind of like very acquainted with the music to the point that I was thinking of it as if it was my own, and I had to really do create a lot of variations and always be thinking about the chords and the way that they function and the way the melody functions, and the whole thing was quite challenging, to be perfectly honest, and also had to be done in a very short amount of time.
How did you decide on the instrumentation and musical elements to evoke the emotional depth required for that storytelling?
We went with instrumentation of the original score, which was string. It was an orchestra basically with a piano very much featured in front, and so that was that defined our orchestration. There are certain scenes, like when Elizabeth, Natalie Portman's character, is in the pet shop, and a few other scenes where there's this ambient music, which was actually I layered tons and tons of pianos until they all sounded like a drone, and I created a cue on top of that. But the instrumentation itself, for the most part, was orchestra with a very heavy use of the piano.
Can you share any memorable moments or scene from the film that particularly influenced your musical choices?
I think that one of the ones that I can think of is towards the opening when Elizabeth, Natalie Portman's character, is driving to meet Julianne Moore's character for the first time, to meet Gracie, and the music had to have it was travel music, so she's driving through this very beautiful place, but also the music had to have an undercurrent of tension because we don't really know what's happening. And one thing that Todd wanted was from the very beginning for the music to always make you feel uncomfortable and feel a little bit out of breath, like you don't know what's going to happen next. So the score, in a sense, sometimes it's ahead of the picture. And as I told Todd, when we're working, we broke every convention of film music scoring that I have ever worked with, in terms of being on purpose ahead of the picture. We are ahead of where the viewer is. In a sense, we're almost in a parallel movie to the viewer.
With the release of the May December score album on December 1, what can listeners expect from the musical collection?
They can expect that thundering theme to come, and to like that haunting theme that is there. It's a short score, but it's very, very dense. And I think it takes you on a very emotional, sometimes a little scary and disturbing journey. But ultimately, it's also very beautiful and played beautifully by a great orchestra in Prague. And so I think it should be enjoyable, but I wouldn't call it relaxing.
How do you believe your musical imprint on May December contribute to the overall cinematic experience for audience?
I believe that the task was to make the Legrand more palatable in a way for a modern audience. So I think that my musical imprint was to how to make it more modern, make it more user friendly, if you will, for a modern film, a contemporary film, but still using this music that sounds quite baroque at times. And I think my work as in orchestration, arrangement, and also performance, and sometimes changing chords and making the whole thing feel a little bit more of our time.
What drew you to work on this specific project, and how did you find the emotional core of the story for your music?
For May December, we're talking, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Uh, well, I came to it because I had worked with Todd Haynes before in his last film, Dark Waters. And can you repeat the question again?
I'm sorry. Um, what drew you to work on this specific project, and how did you find the emotional core of the story for your music?
Uh, well, what drew me to the story is the director, Todd Haynes. I will do anything that Todd Haynes does, and I mean, as long as you have me, I just, he's both somebody that I love working with, but also who I deeply admire as a filmmaker since his very first film. And so, honestly, I would be in it already just because he was directing. But then I love the sort of how not black and white the movie is, and how it doesn't tell you what to feel and what to think of these characters. You think you know these characters, but in some ways, by the end of the film, you know them, you feel like you know them less than you did in the beginning of the film. And I think that's part of the very smart and sophisticated approach that Todd Haynes has to filmmaking, where he doesn't want to tell you who the bad ones or the good ones are, and it's up to us to decide. And most of the time, everything happens in a gray zone.
How do you balance your classical roots, jazz background, and diverse musical experience when crafting film score like May December?
I mean, it's kind of like that's who I am. That mixture of classical music and jazz and road music is very much my DNA as a musician. So I feel like I just try to bring what I believe the movie needs, and I think of it always like I'm a member of the cast, and I'm there working with the cast in with this invisible character that acts in an invisible way. But I think I bring all my baggage and my sensibility to it, just like I would any other movie that I work on. And I think that's what drew also Todd Haynes to call me to this. And I'm also very collaborative. So when he asked me to do this, it's a very unusual request from a director. And frankly, I don't think I would have done it for any director, But as I said, with Todd Haynes, I feel like it's coming from a very sophisticated and creatively challenging but ultimately very satisfying place.
How has your journey from studying in Berklee College of Music and the California Institute of the Arts influenced your approach to film composition?
Um, I think it influenced me because I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of music. At California Institute of the Arts, I was actually a classical piano major, but I played a lot of jazz. I played a lot of ethnic music, a lot of African music, gamelan music. And so I felt like by the time I left, and a lot of modern contemporary music as well, classical music. So I feel like it gave me a very eclectic bag of tricks, if you will. And so even though I never really studied film scoring per se, I feel like it was the perfect education for me because I can go in many different directions as I'm needed for a film.
As a composer, how do you navigate the balance between enhancing the emotion depth of the story and ensuring your music doesn't overpower the narrative?
That all depends on the project. I mean, in the case of May December, music does overpower the narrative, and that's the whole point of it. So as I said, that's a project where everything was completely different and breaks all of the rules that I had followed so far. But I feel like that's what's interesting in this work of working with different directors is that they all have different approaches, and you end up moving to the next project having experienced something different. And I feel like I'm a better, more well-rounded composer after having worked on May December.
Can you discuss your experience working with other directors as Antoine Fuqua, Eva Longoria, and others?
Sure. Well, Antoine Fuqua is my longest and most fruitful collaborator. He's somebody I adore, and we go back almost 20 years working on many, many different films. I've worked with Antoine on every format. We've done feature films, documentaries, multi-episode series. We even did a Quibi, which was now it doesn't exist anymore, but the short format. So we have a lot of trust. I love working with Antoine. He loves music. He loves the way I write music, and he gives me a lot of freedom, but also really great direction. And I just love working with him. He's a very collaborative director, and I love how he moves the camera. I love how he frames his shots. Uh, he's both very classic, very classical in how he shoots, but also there's a real energy, and also I think that he portrays and is able to portray violence and kind of criminal stuff. And he always calls them crime dramas. He doesn't like to, that's how he sees them. But what I really love with Antoine is that it's always about the inner emotion of the characters. He's always concerned about the emotional motivation and never about the physical motivation of the characters. That's a key part of Antoine Fuqua's approach to film music when we have worked together. As far as Eva Longoria, I was very impressed with her. This was her first narrative fiction film. She had directed documentaries and episodic television. She knew exactly what she wanted. She was very focused. She really did her homework and studied other films that she admires, but also allowed us to experiment a lot. She really wanted the movie to have an authenticity in the music. It's a Mexican American story. It was very important to her that felt authentic. And so that's what we spent a lot of time. But also then once we got that together, it was about finding the emotional core of the film, the inspiring story of that character, as well as the humor of it. There's a lot of humor. It's quite funny at times, but she just really was she's very smart, very smart director. I can't wait to see what she does next, because I think she will be a real force in directing for many years to come.
How do you feel about the increasing trend of streaming releases like the one scheduled for May-December on Netflix, impacting the way audience experience film music?
I think streaming is great. I think that it's given, I think, a lot of different filmmakers and films a chance to be seen. You know, I mean, before a movie like May December, with those big stars, I think it probably would have been seen, but I think it gave opportunity to a lot of smaller independent films to be seen by people that are not going to have access to go to an art house in a major city where usually those films are playing. So I actually think that overall the result has been quite positive, and I think it gave more outlets for more good films to be released. So I think it's been a positive influence. And as far as how I approach it, I remember many years ago when I worked on the first HBO project, many years ago, and I asked a person there, should I do it any different? Because it was something for TV at the time. And he said, no, just write it like it's a film. And that's what I do. Everything for me is a film. Doesn't matter where people are going to ultimately watch it. I just try to do the most cinematic, emotional, and kind of powerful experience that I can help provide with the music, whatever the format that it's going to be seen in.
Beyond May-December, are there any upcoming projects or genre you will particularly excited to explore in your future work?
Yes, Cassandra is a film that I'm very excited. The film is out now, out on Amazon, and it's a story of a gay luchador, like he does the lucha libre, the wrestling, and a Mexican wrestler, and it's a very inspiring story with the great actor Gael Garcia Bernal. I'm very excited about where we landed with this film. It has this kind of noir Mexican feel to it. Is very beautiful, very emotional, very gritty, but also very inspirational almost on the story. So I'm very excited about Cassandra, I think, and I'm very happy with how the music came out.
And my last question, looking back on the year of successful film composition, how has your experience been and what lesson have you learned along the way?
For this year in particular?
Yes.
I think my experience is, this was a very busy year. I had many movies released. Some of them I scored last year. And it was, first of all, a lot of gratitude for being able to work on so many interesting and diverse projects. And also to, try to manage my time very well, because there was a lot of very tight deadlines that luckily I was able to achieve. But I think it was also just being very present on each of the movies, try to carry the experience from one to the next, but also you always start from scratch every time and trying to bring something original and very specific to the particular project.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Au
Take
revoir.
care. Take care. Au revoir.
For Zarvos, yeah.